Hi everyone. Since I have a lot of subscribers who are beginners, today's video is an attempt to let the beginners have a go at all the major techniques with decoupage without worrying too much about messing up the base. So I would recommend that if you're a beginner and are worried of messing up your base on which you'll be decoupaging, these are just a few small plywood pieces that were actually to be discarded after some woodwork done at my place, and I suggest you start and practice on something as cheap as this, so you aren't worried about trying out the new techniques, as you aren't worried about an expensive base go waste. So I've just sanded down the edges, and this is the paper that I'm going to use. It is a thick paper on which I have just taken prints of some windows and doors and alleys and walkways, one of which has been used already. Many a times I get asked what kind of paper is to be used for decoupaging, and for decoupaging the options are limitless. You can use right from paper napkins, tissue papers, to magazine cutouts from old books, catalogs, or motifs or shapes from wrapping paper, wallpaper, fabric, you name it. You can just any kind of paper or fabric or ribbons or posters, even dried flowers. I have many other videos showing different papers, different kinds of papers that I have decoupaged over different bases, so you can definitely have a look at that, and it's all about getting creative. I would also like to mention that if you would be taking prints and working with them for decoupaging, always make sure the prints are from a laser printer and not from an inkjet one, as the ink from the inkjet printer is likely to bleed during the process. Here I have hand torn all the motifs to have uneven edges. As you can see, the paper is quite thick, so I don't have to paint the base. Otherwise, it's necessary if you're working with tissue papers or napkins or rice paper, it's necessary that you paint the base white. But here I wouldn't have to do that because the paper is quite thick, so I can directly glue it onto the base. If you are a beginner, I suggest you work with such thick paper first for practice. The next step would be applying decoupage glue onto the surface to be decoupaged. Cover the entire surface with glue, applying it evenly all over. Place the cutout and almost immediately start smoothing it out from the center outward, smoothing all the creases. Try to straighten the paper as much as possible, applying only as much pressure as the paper can handle. Do not put too much pressure, as the paper is wet with the glue and might eventually tear with too much pressure. How you apply glue and how much of it entirely depends on the type of paper you're using. The thinner and more fragile papers need the glue to be applied very sparingly and need to be worked on part by part. However, thicker papers like this are much more forgiving, and if you're a novice at decoupaging, I suggest you start with thicker papers first for practice. Once done, let it dry completely before following with the next step. Once all dried, the next step that always follows is sealing the edges. Take some decoupage glue onto a flat brush and apply on the edges to seal them down. Now, we do not run the glue all over the cutout or the paper to be decoupaged, is because we will be working on it with archival inks while stamping, and decoupage glue once dried forms a protective layer which would not let the glue adhere well and is likely to get smudged, as opposed to bare paper. Once the decoupage glue on the edges has dried completely, we move on to the next step. The next step would be covering the portions of the plaque that aren't covered by the decoupage paper. For this, I use chalk paint of shades closest to the paper, as it makes it all blend well and the overall result appears more of an inlay. Here you can see I've taken shades like grey and black, and with the help of a sponge dabber, I just go over the edges, trying to blend it all with the picture. Working on a flat surface like this is ideal for beginners as the straight surface minimizes error and is great to practice blending paint with the picture. So this is how I have done it. Now there of course is no hard and fast rule on how to paint, but the whole objective of decoupage is to make it look as near perfect an inlay as possible. At this step the paint might appear patchy and unfinished, however post the stamping it all comes together. I have also kept this one a bit rustic and haven't gone for a completely finessed look. Now for the stamping, I use archival inks and clear silicone stamps. I also use rubber stamps from time to time. You just have to dab the stamp over the choice of your ink and press it onto where you would like to stamp. Press it firmly to make sure the stamp is clear. You could use a variety of different inks as well as different stamps for one project. Like here I've switched the stamp and I'm using another one. I've used 2 or 3 stamps for this project. And the same goes for the inks as well. Once the stamping is done, you would notice that it has all come together and it looks perfect now. Make sure you don't leave out the edges. Once the inks dried thoroughly, I put on a coat of decoupage glue, which I unfortunately forgot to capture. I haven't painted the back as you can see, and now for the last step, coating it with a water-based wood varnish. On a flat brush, take some varnish, water-based wood varnish, and spread a thin layer over the entire project. Now for the last step. This step could also be done right at the beginning, attaching the hook to the back of the plaque to hang it.